In this video, we're going to be talking about the 1957 classic film noir. I know that's disputed, but we'll get into that. Sweet Smell of Success, which stars Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis and was directed by Alexander Mackendrick. We're Coffee with Aliens at the Movies, a film education and film review channel. My name is Robert Bellissimo. I'm an actor and acting teacher.
I'm Steve Chambers. I'm a writer and actor.
And if this is your first time here, or if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to our channel by clicking on the red watermark subscribe button, which you'll find in the bottom right of your screen or beside the description box. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time we release a new video or go live. Okay,
yeah.
So here we go. I love this movie, and I was surprised that you hadn't seen it before.
I was surprised I hadn't seen it. Yeah. I found it fascinating the way it opens with the New York Times and the truck and the loading and unloading, whatever, loading early morning of the newspapers. I was really into it. And there's a staccato with the dialogue that sounded like the jazz band. Like it sounds like music. Like it's got a like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is. And someone was quoted, and you might know who, but it's sort of saying something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, but of this film, so New York, it's the way, you know, no New Yorker actually sounds, but how every New Yorker wishes they sound.
Right.
And I thought, yeah, I get that. Like, it's so rhythmic and cool. That
it's very stylized. Yeah.
It's very stylized, but not in a way that takes away. It's a unique experiment because it's so stylized that I did find I would get lost.
Yeah.
Separate from the plot, because I'd just be listening lulled into this rhythm that was really exciting. And while it's stylized, it still does have like a gritty thing, not like a documentary feel, nothing like Shadows in that way, but it does have, I guess it, you know what, I maybe it is what you said. Maybe it is just that it is stylized, but because it was shot on the streets, it felt a little more quote unquote real. But it is very stylized. And it's just, you know, at the risk of sounding flippant, but it is a really cool movie. Like, it's so cool. Like, it's a really neat movie.
Well, you know, it's interesting because they had Clifford Odets rewrite it. And Clifford, for anyone who doesn't know Clifford Odets, he was a major playwright as part of the group theater in the 1930s. And he wrote Golden Boy. He wrote Awake and Sing. He wrote Waiting for Lefty. He wrote a number of plays, and he has a very distinctive way of writing. It's not necessarily naturalistic. There's a style to it, but as long and of course Alexander Mackendrick was concerned about the dialogue, and Odette said if everyone plays it really committed and really straight, no one is going to be distracted by the style of talking. 100%. And it's like a lot of analogies, you know, like like I love when I do. I like it too. And I love when he tells Tony Curtis to go beat up to get the guy dating his sister beat up later. And he's like, I don't mind wearing your dog collar, but I won't wear the noose. You know, I just love that. It's just like, but I suppose, I don't know if it's necessarily considered a flaw, but I suppose that, because even me, like when I watched it again, I've seen this a number of times. When I watched it again last night, I was really paying attention to what they meant by what they were saying. Okay. And then when I did that, I was really brought into the ugliness of it. Whereas before, I could see it was ugly, but I think because it's, you know, it's late 1950s, it's black and white, it's got this great, this amazing Bernstein score, Elmer Bernstein did this. It sounds a lot like The Man with the Golden Arm. It's the same composer.
Same composer, yeah.
And I was like, how did I miss some of these things? And I think it's because the style of it can leave you outside of really what's going on. 100%. I don't know if that's necessarily a flaw, because David Mamet, playwright, he writes like that too. It's very easy to get caught up in like this rat-a-tat
into the
sharp way of talking.
But if you look at in the music and you don't hear the lyrics. is how I'm guilty of that in general, specifically with music, but in this film, I think you're saying it perfectly. And Mamet, I think a lot of really good playwrights, when they do it well, and then it's more importantly performed well. I didn't know what you said that Odets said to Mackendrick, but that makes total sense. Listen, if the actors just play it, straight, commit to it, it doesn't matter. You'll sell it. And I agree, because you're totally right. It's so highly stylized. However, no part of me while I was watching it was like, no one talks like this. No, I was just really
me neither.
I mean, there's a line near the beginning, I think, when Tony Curtis, which is explain what it's about, but a very, very, very prominent columnist, right? Newspaper columnist, is based on Walter Winchell, played by Lancaster, who also produced, kind of runs the town as far as entertainment goes. But we're really focusing on the publicist, the press agent, played by Tony Curtis, who, like so many other people in New York City at that time, they will do anything to get into Burt Lancaster. I forget the character's name, JJ something's good favor. And they will be his whipping boy or wear his dog collar. And there's a line near the beginning when he's trying to sit with him at a restaurant, and Burt Lancaster's talking and holding court, and so cold and harsh and just detached like a serial killer. And he puts a cigarette in his mouth and barely he doesn't make eye contact with Tony Curtis. He's still talking to someone else, cigarette, and he just says, "Match me." I was like, oh man, imagine that.
And Tony Curtis doesn't do it, which is interesting.
No, he doesn't. Do
it. He's more ballsy. His character, Sidney Falco, is
great character.
When you see the other characters, they're like begging, like they treat him like a servant.
Hey, no, that's not what he means. Hey. So it's Tony Curtis and I forget the actor's name, who plays Steve, the jazz guitar player. I like the actor.
I forget his name too. He was in a lot of stuff back then.
He was in a lot of Twilight Zones. He was in the TV show Adam 12. Route 66.
He was very good.
Jeez, I should know that. Anyway, that guy and Tony Curtis are the only ones that sort of stand up to Burt Lancaster. And Tony Curtis knows that. So the whole thing here is that jazz guitar player is dating Burt Lancaster's sister. And he's oddly close and protective of his sister and wants to sabotage that relationship on the surface, because I don't want him dating a musician, what with their, their marijuana, cigarettes. But I think he doesn't want her dating anyone. I don't know if it's like a fatherly protective thing he's got going, or more of a jealous lover thing. But it's
that's what's interesting about it, is that they don't tell you, so it can really be whatever you think it is. Is it incestual? Is it I don't
know. And she's not.
You don't know what happened.
She's so fragile.
She's terrified of him as well, right?
And the whole thing
can't stand up to him.
No. And the whole thing is, this guy just, he'll do whatever it takes to sabotage this relationship, and he's going to enlist Tony Curtis's Sidney Falco, the character, to help him. Hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch you. You help me out, break up that relationship. I'll make sure your career. I have the golden ticket. I will make sure your career goes where you want it to go. And I have no morals. I'll do whatever you say. But right away, Curtis knows, this guitar player is going to stand up to you. He's not going to go in for this. It's not, your plan isn't going to work as perfectly as you think, because you're so used to being able to manipulate people like, pieces on a chessboard. But this kid's different, and I'm different. And that's really what's going on here. It's for the first time, the Burt Lancaster character is not getting his way so easily. He's got people developing morals in front of him and questioning him, and even his own sister. And he doesn't know what to do with the threat of losing his power. And that's the story here, that takes place only over the course of a few days. And
right. Then again, that scene, the scene that you mentioned there, where the guitar player stands up to Lancaster. What's interesting is that was part of the con that was mainly Sidney. Yes. Yeah, he knew. He said, because Falco was an interesting character. Like he he's such a hustler. He's such a con man, but
Yes.
he knew what people would think, and he knew how people would react. And right off the bat, he was told to break up this relationship, and he couldn't quite pull it off. And of course, another great line at the beginning where Lancaster says, "You're dead already. You're dead already. Now go and get buried."
That was
That
Jessica
was great.
overheard that. She wasn't watching it, but I had it
Yeah.
playing in the other room and she was working or something. But she heard that line and repeated it back. Like she's like, "Oh." And that
Yeah.
was like, to me, that's the coolest line I've heard, in a movie. I just want to say,
Right.
I
But
just quickly looked it up. Martin Milner
Martin Milner.
is
Yeah,
who
it's the
plays
guitar.
Steve Dallas. Yeah.
The guitar player. But
Yeah.
it's really remarkable. Well, not remarkable, but I suppose interesting that he was resourceful, even though how he's doing it is so ugly, as a way to give JJ, what he wants. This is all on his own doing. Like JJ didn't tell him to do this, but it was like,
No.
okay, well then I'll smear this guy, and then I'll get JJ to fix the smear so that they won't suspect he was in on it. But then he knew that the guy was smart enough and has enough integrity to still know that JJ was behind the schmear, that it was all this act and con. But he knew that would lead to a fight, and he knew that then likely, because the sister couldn't stand up to JJ, and if anyone saw someone tear the brother up in front of the sister, that the sister would back up the brother. But you see, that's also part of the mistake they make, right? Because I think they take the sister for granted because she wasn't. They think
she's property.
She turns the con on them, right? And that's how she that whole suicide thing. She totally set up Curtis to get him in the apartment to make it look like he was trying to rape her, which he wasn't.
No. He thought he was trying to
save her from jumping out the window. That's then, she knew, and knew, and, Lancaster away with it. I think the sister knew he was behind this con about getting the guy fired and then getting his job back. But it wasn't far enough that she could stand up to him. But then what was far enough was getting the cop, to the crooked cop that is part of
Kello,
yeah. Kello.
Based on Eddie Egan.
Yeah, I read that this morning. Apparently, also loosely based on Eddie Egan.
Who Popeye Doyle was based on, for anyone.
Right, right. And then to get him to that he went too far. His ego came in, his anger took over, and then to get this guy beat up. No, she wasn't going to stand for it. And Eddie and Falco was right. If he had just said, look, even for Eddie, even for a guy like Falco, that was just too much. It's like, look, you're going to drive them back together. And he was right. Yeah. Like he's a smart guy, even though he's such an asshole, and he's so, that's what's so interesting about some actors, a guy like Tony Curtis. Like, I never really hate him. I started to hate him more last night when I watched. I'm like, man, if you look at what he's doing, like, he's blackmailing people. Like, he goes up to that one columnist and he knows that he's cheated on his wife. He's like, print this smear. I'm going to tell your wife what you're up to. And then he goes to the other guy and the other columnist. And this guy's got an eye for the ladies, right? So what does he do? He goes to a woman he knows who's vulnerable, B, desperate for money, lost her job,
and prostitutes her.
Yeah. And he's like, hey, when she says no, don't you have a son? And he puts her in a position of very vulnerable and scares her, not like scares her, threatens her, but in a way like, hey, what are you going to do for money? Hey, all you got to do is sleep with this guy, right?
I know.
He's such a con man.
Yeah. But there is something interesting. You're right. In fact, like, he's totally despicable. He's not as bad, when you compare him to J.J. Hunsaker.
No, he's not as bad as him.
No, he's not as bad, which isn't saying much. But because it's Tony Curtis, who to me, and I think, the studio, I don't know, Lancaster produced this. I think it was kind of low budget, but he's got a sweetness and this sort of, you can excuse his behavior. Like, if someone else played Sidney Falco other than Tony Curtis, like if you had Marlon Brando, it's a dick. you know,
I think so.
or someone
Yeah.
else, or I can't think of who, but you know, just like a weasel, a tough guy or whatever. But when you have like someone like Tony Curtis, who's just, hey, I'm just trying to get along. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
he's very charming.
He's
Um,
just he tries to get by. I love when he's, you know, his secretary's looking at him like, what are you doing? And then he's like, this is life, get used to it, right? And I
yeah,
just thought, ooh, like this guy just, he's a hustler. And he even says it
he
later, you know,
is.
I hustle, I go out to do what I need to do. And talk about no morals. And you know, I look at the world today, and I'm not surprised this film holds up, because how many people live, I mean, not necessarily doing what they're doing, but you know, it's very common for people to be looking out totally for themselves, to not care about how they're going to affect other people.
Yeah.
And that's why, to me, back on this, whether or not this is a noir, I mean, sure, it's not traditionally a noir in a femme fatale, a murder, a doomed character, and so on and so forth. But I mean, look at what's going on. It's Manhattan after midnight.
Yeah, none of your protagonists are good people.
None of your protagonists are heroes or good
Not
guys.
at all.
They're con men. They're pimps. They're
Yeah,
hustlers. They're
crooked
gangsters.
cops.
They're
And
crooked. I mean, this is fucking noir. I mean, this
no,
doesn't
I
get
go
any
with you.
more noir. Other than pulling the trigger, it doesn't get any more
Well,
noir than
I
that.
think it's that simple, right? Like I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think I'm really not. I go either way. Like, yeah, sure. You tell me it's noir, I won't argue that. But I think a lot of people, myself initially, just visually, because there isn't a smoking gun and a detective. But yeah, no, I agree. And I think what's interesting too is, you know, the way the story is told, it makes you the audience. You're Sidney Falco. You're Tony Curtis. Like you have to
Yeah,
be.
that's
You're not.
true.
You're with him pretty much every scene of the film, right? So you kind of become the bad guy.
Yeah,
So I think that's why it makes it easier for you to excuse him, because you're trying to excuse. Well, here's what I guess I'd have to do that as well if I were in this situation.
that's a
I
good
guess,
point.
you
Yeah,
know, because you're
it's very
trying to
much
make
from
excuses for
Falco.
yourself. It
Yeah,
absolutely is. And if you
from his
think
point
about
of
it
view.
that way, I mean, Hunsaker's at a place like he knows that he's a snake. Like he knows it. He knows it. But he's come to a place in his life where he's fine with it. Like I've
Yeah, oh, he loves
accepted
it.
it. You know,
He
or he loves it. Like
loves it.
this is it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna change. This, you know, the mighty shall inherit the earth. I am the mighty. It's that sort of like, I don't care.
Well, he
Get them
sees.
before they get you. Whereas
Yeah,
Tony
and
Curtis, I think, is telling himself this. He doesn't actually say this, but I get the vibe that he's sort of like, I hate doing what I'm doing, but I'll do it till I get to a certain place where I want to be in my life. And then I swear to God, I'll be good. Oh, I swear I'll be good. Now, whether
yeah,
or not he would be, I don't know. I think the film is saying he kind of would be by the end. Like he's probably like, oh, Jesus, I've been a bad guy. And whereas Hunsaker's like, "Oh, you've been a bad guy? Oh no, I am the devil. And I'm fine with that. And I'm going to stay
yeah.
this way because
That's a good
that's
point.
power, that's success. And
Yeah,
so that makes him like a clear-cut villain. And Tony
yeah,
Curtis sort of like the film noir protagonist where you're a
yeah,
little on the
yeah.
fence.
A
It is
little, yeah,
because you're doing the bad things, but the ends justify the means, almost sort of like a Bogart in whatever, The Big Sleep. Like he does shitty things to get the job done. Like he lets Lauren Bacall off from murder for his own, because he likes her. Like it's not a good guy,
right,
uh, but he still makes sure a bad person pays a price. And here, Falco's, he's not making sure a bad person's going to pay a price. I mean, no one's really, the price that's going to be paid here is Lancaster's character. He's lost a
right.
sister, but that's
Yeah,
all, like you said, her own doing. They, and you nailed it, they totally underestimated her.
yeah,
She played the con at the end. She got free, right?
yeah.
And symbolically, and I'm not the first one to point this out, that whole film, she's wearing a fur coat until the end. That fur
That's
coat
right. That
is
was the
because
one
she
he
is
bought her.
owned. That's right. She's owned by him
Yeah,
until she, you know, plays her little game at the end, gets herself free, walks by Tony Curtis all beat up, and she's like, I'm done. And she puts on more of like a humble, just a wool jacket or whatever, and she's free. And so in a weird twist, even though we haven't been paying as close attention to her as we should have, she's the hero. She did the right thing. She rode off into the sunset like the cowboy movies.
That's a good
right?
point.
And
Yeah,
the
that's a really
reason
good
we
point.
didn't, and it's interesting because we don't follow her, because we, like the characters, totally take her for granted. So
Right.
she, because we don't have our eye on her, she can fully start to work the room and manipulate and do what she wants to do, because the characters, like the audience, aren't paying any attention to her because we're taking her for granted. She's just a
That's a good
girl. She's
point.
just a
Yeah.
girl.
She's just a
But
young 19-year-old,
in
doesn't,
the 50s, like, what does she know? She
yeah.
wears her powerful brother's fur coat, and he, sends her on cruises and all this. And so we're
Yeah.
just watching the two assholes,
Right.
one of which is a lesser asshole than the other, but that's about it. But really,
Yeah.
I'm just realizing this as I say it. I think it's her, and I'm sorry, I forget the actress's name, but she's the hero here, right?
Yeah,
The sister.
that's a really good point. Yeah, she is the one who walks off fresh with a new look out on life into the sunset. Whereas, you
Susan
know,
Harrison.
yeah, Susan Harrison. Whereas Falco gets, beat up by the cop and arrested because, because he did plant drugs on the guitar
Yeah.
player. Of course, they were going to try to get. Well, that was how he got him beat up in the first place. And so he then the cop arrests him for it, even though he knows that's already true. But of course,
Yep.
crooked cop, he can just write out whatever he wants, and yeah, and then Lancaster is left totally alone. But another point you bring up is this success, this ambition, which is why Falco's doing this. He wants to be with the high rollers. He wants to be
Yes.
almost JJ in a sense, have his own column, stuff like that. And that's a very noir theme. Money, wanting money,
that's a good
want
point.
ambition at all costs, even if you're destroying your soul and everyone else around you. So, which is, you see that in Body and Soul. You see that in so many noir movies, and there's another moment that I never picked up on, that I picked up on this time, which was when he leaves his office and his secretary says, "Aren't you going to bring your coat?" And then he says something. He mentions something about, well, then he's going to have to leave tips. He says something along those lines. And then later on, JJ notices, "Hey, did you not bring your coat because you're trying to save on tips?" Meanwhile, this guy's got the coat on, and he's tipping everyone. And he's like, "Look at me. I'm the slick one. I'm the cool one. I'm the guy with money in my pockets. You can't even bring your fucking coat because you don't have any tip money." And I thought, Jesus Christ, I never picked up on that. There's all of those subtle moments.
Neither did I,
right?
till you just said that. That's really good. Oh, it's absolutely a movie that, I think we'll get more. It deserves repeat viewings, and not because
definitely.
it's a mystery.
No.
But like you said, number one, I think we nailed this off the top. I think you're going to get lost in a good way. This is not a demerit point from the film. I think you're going to get lost in the music. Okay.
Yeah.
Literally, it's cool music, but of the language. Number two, I think, okay, you go watch it, you listen. Okay, now I got it. But then maybe on your third viewing, now you're past all the language. Now start watching the behavior.
That's exactly it.
And there's a lot going on. Like, it's a pretty layered film. Like, okay, its plot is simple. I wouldn't call it simple. In fact, its plot is simple in that it doesn't involve a ton of characters and a bunch of locales and, intrigue and espionage. No, it's really just a few people in New York City. But it's pretty layered. It's not a simple.
Oh yeah,
plot.
Yeah. No, it moves, right? It really
moves, and it really moves. It's a very fast film. Well, in fact, I think it's only an hour and a half anyway.
It's just over an hour and a half.
It's just over an hour and a half, and it moves. It felt like an hour. It went really fast. It looks great. It just looks great. It sounds great on so many levels. And then once you get past all the sort of aesthetic trappings, the acting's great because you said it, right? Or Odets, I guess, said it. These guys commit to what they're saying, and it is cool, and like, no one would ever say that. Yeah, but they do, and you buy it because they bought it when they said it. And also, so Clifford Odets, I just want to say, I don't know if we brought this up, The original story, Clifford Odets was brought on later. Ernest Lehman, Lehman.
Yeah,
You did
Lehman
bring
or
him up.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he wrote, North by Northwest, and was a screenwriter on Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf when it was turned into a film.
yeah, yeah.
And this was based on a short story, a novelette that initially appeared in Cosmopolitan magazine and then later was published as a book. And when it was turned into a screenplay, he bowed out because he was sick.
Right.
Something happened, and he was initially supposed to direct too, and that didn't happen. And so they had to bring in someone to finish it up. And I think Mackendrick, the director, wanted Paddy Chayefsky, but for one reason or another, they didn't get him. Well, 1957, I don't know, but they ended up with Clifford Odets. And as they say, Odets restructured like everything.
Apparently he practically rewrote it.
Rewrote it, all the
at least
dialogue, all the
yeah.
cool stuff, all the analogies and metaphors are Odets. I think Lehman had the overall plot, but not the scene by scene, style and rhythm. That was all Odets, and it is really fun to listen to. It's really, really. Yeah. You could almost put this movie on an audio file only and walk down the street at downtown listening to it, and it's just, and it does have like literally good music. Like we said, Elmer Bernstein did a really great bluesy, sort of brassy, cool score, and then there's a jazz band in it. There's a lot of jazz music, some of that music, and I know it, there's little bits of music and scene transitions that Paul Thomas Anderson used in the beginning of Boogie Nights. You'll hear he used the exact thing for William H. Macy's character when Macy's coming home and he's sort of put upon and beat down. And it's music from Sweet Smell of Success, which isn't a surprise because, so many writers and directors list this as one of their favorite films. I know Vince Gilligan. Vince Gilligan of Breaking Bad, the creator of Breaking Bad, named a couple of his episodes after lines from this film. I forget. Yeah, Scorsese, Paul Thomas Anderson.
Scorsese even got apparently when they were doing Wolf of Wall Street with DiCaprio. He screen, because Scorsese does that often. He will screen movies that remind him of the
great
content
idea. Yeah,
of their
Tarantino
film.
took that from him. Yeah.
Yeah, and this was one. DiCaprio, I'd seen it before, but he said, you see it again, because now that when I see it, when I got past the externals that we've been discussing, I can see that, because Wolf of Wall Street, he is that same kind of, ruthless, con man, hustler, ruthless kind of guy, right? So,
well, I'm not surprised you said DiCaprio had already seen it, like off topic, but it's interesting. I don't think it's a coincidence, and I've talked about this more and more. I think you and I have discussed this, but a lot of the actors that I really like to watch, I find out they are hardcore cinephiles, right? Like, DiCaprio knows movies. Ryan Gosling knows movies. Like they know, because they know where they're coming from, right? You got to know your history, and know rhythms, and you get it. Okay, here's what this director wants. He wants that vibe. Okay.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
And that makes sense. And but back to the initial point here. Man, I'm as surprised as you are that I'd never seen this film. Like I really thought I had, because I knew the image of Burt Lancaster and those brow line glasses. I'm like, I've seen this. I must have seen it. I'll just refresh my memory and watch it again. And like I say, within 8 minutes, I'm like, no, I've never seen this in my life. I remember my uncle told me to see it years and years ago, the guy who got me into like everything, but I somehow didn't see it. But I'm glad I found it very easily on Archive.
It's free. I didn't know that because I've had the
great
DVD.
Quality.
I've had the DVD for a long time. It is also a Criterion channel. Criterion Collection DVD and Blu-ray. I don't have that one. I have an older version. It was on the Criterion channel for a while, but it's not. It was taken down. But there's a lot of really great featurettes, which include a almost documentary on Mackendrick, who went on to become only he did make some films after this, but he became
I don't know about him.
he became a professor, a film professor, I believe at UCLA until he died in 1993. But he was another known fact about this film, and I'm sure you read this, was that he and Lancaster did not get along at all.
No, I didn't read that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, Lancaster, he wanted, well, I don't know if this is necessarily true, but the only reason Lancaster didn't direct this was because the previous film he directed didn't turn out well. The Kentuckian. So he got this guy who was not even American, from England, who had made some British films that were good, that he obviously liked. And almost as a way that he thought that he could control the guy because he was also the producer, like not a big, he's like, well, this guy isn't famous. He's new. I'll probably be able to run this almost. But that's not what happened, because this guy was like, he was a perfectionist. He wanted to do 30 takes. He wanted it rewritten, and it was his idea to have it rewritten by Odets, right? Man, him and he said he was afraid of Lancaster. It was almost as if Lancaster became JJ in a way. I hear mixed things about him on set. Some people, I'm sure everyone's complex, right? He was kind and generous and patient, but then he could also, because he was a producer, he was also very tough.
Right.
They fought a lot. There was he was like, why are you doing 30 takes? To the point where he even wouldn't let him edit it. And then he realized his mistake. Because then they tried. I don't know if it was that he didn't let him edit all of it, but the final cut was done by someone else. And then he was like, he didn't like it, Lancaster, and he was like, "No, I'm wrong. We got to get Mackendrick." He realized he was only doing it out of anger, and he was like, Mackendrick will know how to.
He'd rather be right than happy, at the expense of a good film.
But luckily, he turned it around, and Mackendrick did cut this. Like, it was his final cut.
Okay.
And thank God. But it bombed at the box office.
I knew. Yeah. I'm surprised.
And apparently Lancaster, even at the after party, because the other co-writer, the guy who
Ernest
Lemon was there, or Lehman, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, and he said, this could have been a really, really good movie if you had just totally committed to it. And I don't know why maybe Lancaster wasn't totally happy with it, which is caught with. There's other films of his that I love that he also wasn't totally happy with, like The Swimmer is another one with Lancaster.
I haven't seen that. I want to see that.
Yeah, it's great, and he's great in it.
I've been told about that.
I'm not sure, because obviously this film, Lancaster died in '94, and it, in the years after that, it was embraced. Like, it was. Yeah. It was embraced.
Well, do you know why?
I wonder if he kind of changed his mind about that. I'm not sure, but I love it. I think it's.
But do you know where the turnaround was? Like, when it became like you said, like, now people really like it.
I don't know
what happened.
Definitely when he was alive. Definitely when he. I imagine guys like Scorsese. When the new Hollywood guys, those guys were talking about it. Scorsese, Ebert was a big fan of this. Of course, Ebert became also a massive critic. I
did know he really, really, really liked Sweet Smell of Success as well. Yeah. And again, like most of what I read, obviously, people love this thing. And
it's great,
but it was it really, really tanked in 1957 critically and at the box office. So I'm always curious, like, well, what turned it around? But you're probably right, it was the new Hollywood. It's the kids that came up in the 60s and 70s rediscovering it, and then obviously by the time you and I started watching movies, it's already a classic. Like, I didn't know it had a bad rep.
It was also the first movie on TCM. The first intro.
I knew that. I watched
did.
That. Yeah. I saw that.
And Ben Mankiewicz also loves it.
Yes, I saw it.
Ben Mankiewicz. He's now, he was always one of the hosts at TCM, but since Robert Osborne has passed, he's basically the main host with a few others who they rotate. and Eddie Muller, who's a major who does all the film noirs on TCM. He's the one who really has
so
pushed
he calls
this
this a noir, right?
As a noir, yeah.
Okay.
He understands that it's not traditional, but like I mentioned earlier, if you look at the context, a lot of these themes are very much comes from that. I suppose you call that a genre. So I think I think it definitely is. I think it definitely is.
I don't disagree with that. I really don't. But funnily enough, still, if someone asked me, you know, to name noir, I wouldn't think. It doesn't mean I disagree with you. I just wouldn't think to name this as a noir.
Neither would I until I saw it again last night, because I started thinking, is it? I'm like, I don't know, and then I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah, it really, like you see, exactly, like thematically, technically, it is. I personally am maybe more old-fashioned and need the detective and the you know, the murders you know, to feel like it's a real noir. Having said that, listen, if anyone says this is a noir, 100%, it's just I wouldn't think of it as such. But hey, folks, you heard it. Our Robert Bellissimo said it's a noir. Eddie Muller said it's a noir.
I am the authority on this.
He's the guy. he also said The Sound of Music's a noir. So hey, I guess it is now, because
that's our next video. That's our next video. Could you imagine the reactions?
I would love to do that. Let's just pick Gremlins, noir or not noir.
Oh my God, we'll get murdered
people
for that.
Who aren't watching the video but just yelling with their fingertips. But no, I'm glad you suggested this. I did like it a lot, like really a lot. Like I will absolutely watch this again.
Oh yeah, no, me too.
Most of the films that I was thinking the other day that you've picked, I really liked. Some, but Marriage of Maria Braun, nope. Nah. But I flashed to, even though it's got nothing to do with this film, but like Cleo from 5 to 7.
Oh yeah.
One of the best films I've seen. This up there as well. I like this. I'm glad I found it so easily, and a really good quality, because you want a good quality for this, like, because it is so cool and crisp.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
It's all at nighttime. Like I don't really remember a daytime shot in this.
No, other than at the very end, when it's like
well, it's dawn, right?
6 a.m. or something.
Yeah,
it's all Manhattan after night.
Or in bars, lounges, jazz bars, clubs.
Yeah, exactly.
And you really, you know, when it ends, you feel like you were there. It's really neat, and a neat trick. I do this with black and white films. I did this with The Haunting, and I told you to do it. But you can also do it with this. Watch it in the dark, because your surroundings will start to look black and white too. And when the film's over, you really feel like you're still in that world. It's a weird feeling. It's scary with The Haunting, but really cool with Sweet Smell of Success. But
the only difference here is that when the movie's over, you look in the mirror and you're Tony Curtis.
Yeah, you're Tony Curtis. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Get the lights on. Not that people would want to complain about looking like him, right?
Yeah. No. Hey, man, that's Tony Curtis.
Another bit of trivia is that apparently, you know, because he was this major star at that time. So many people were there going crazy because they were shooting on the streets, right?
It was like
a lot of fans were going and disrupting the shooting.
Yeah, they're on the street.
Like that,
exactly.
Right? So,
with a really big. Not only a big, you know, actor, but he was a heartthrob, right? He was a young guy. Girls love.
Yeah, he's only about 32 here, 33.
I don't know. Is that right? He looks like a baby. I have no idea.
He's about 32, 33. Young. Yeah, he was pretty young.
Yeah, that makes sense, because he had started. Yeah, I guess 1957. Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah,
man. This is a really, really cool film. I'm really glad.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you liked it, because I love it. And thanks for letting me know that I didn't know it's on archive.org. So if you haven't seen it, archive.org is a free internet library streaming service where you can watch tons of classic movies that they have on there.
They have all the Columbo episodes too.
Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah, they got everything, man.
Yeah.
If you can't find it on one of your streamers,
Yeah,
check
just search.
archive, because they have
Yeah,
a lot of good old stuff that's hard to
a
find.
lot of good, really, really good old stuff.
Yeah,
And
good quality.
and I highly recommend the Criterion DVD or Blu-ray because
well, that's got all those features.
It has an enormous amount of features, which I'm sure will come back on the Criterion channel. For anyone who doesn't have the Criterion channel, when they put on movies that they have released as a DVD or Blu-ray, all of the featurettes are also on the channel.
I was just going to ask that. So they'll come on the channel too?
They do. Yeah,
like
they always do. I believe
because I love
some of them, not all. I'm not quite sure. I believe a lot of the commentaries are. It's pretty much everything. Will go for everything that was from the DVD and the Blu-ray will go on the channel. Cool. So it's not on there now, but I'm sure it will come back. I'm sure it will come back. But
cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for watching, everyone. Again, if this is your first time here, or if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to our channel by clicking on our Coffee with Aliens at the Movies logo to my top right, and then hit the bell in order to get a notification every time we release a new video or go live. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you next time.